Hey everybody, I'm Nick Nicholas and this is my son Chris, and we've been sharing on these podcasts ways for you to manage fear so that it doesn't control your life, so that you can live a life of peace rather than have to deal with all of the chaotic stuff that's going on in our world today. And we have talked about a lot of things, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris at this point, and he's got some things he wants to share and ask about as we go. So Chris, the floor is all yours.
Thanks. You're right. We have covered a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and if people aren't careful, they can be very overwhelmed with
Easily.
this. So, you mentioned in our last podcast the day that you left
Mm-hmm.
in '68. I was 4 years old, and the only thing I remember from that day is I was on the couch and I was bawling my head off as you walked out the door, and the last thing that you said was "I'll be back," and you shut the door, and you never came back, basically. So what I've come to understand is my biggest fear, the part that you talked about that's over there in the permanent fear column, is the fear of being alone, and you touched on that. Something that I want to make sure that everybody understands, because I think this is critical. You and I haven't always had the best relationship. It's
No, we
been
haven't.
on again, off again, and it started in at that time in '68. And at the time that I called you in 2017, we were somewhat on the positive side of halfway. But I didn't truly trust you
Mm-hmm.
at the time. And the point I want to make in all this is people that are watching this don't know us.
Right, that's true.
How do they know to trust us? And my comment to that is, sometimes you just have to take that first little step. I did not know that I trusted you. I knew that I thought a lot of it was BS, but I made the decision to take that little step.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to encourage everybody to think about just taking that little step. It's not going to hurt. And if you see the positivity that can come out of this, it's incredible.
Our relationship, I think, is very strong right now. Would you agree?
It is the best that it's ever been in my 55 years that I know about.
Yep.
You know, when I was 2, 3, 4, I didn't know a whole lot.
Sure.
But yes, as an adult, it's
wonderful. It's wonderful.
I want to just take a few minutes, because I was just taking step after step after step. I did not understand any of this
Mm-hmm.
while I was going through it. I just had to trust.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want to go back through. I was at a point so dark that I saw no other way out. Any ideas that you came to me with, I had reasons why. And you finally made what decision? That you couldn't do what?
That I couldn't do what? I made the decision I couldn't make you believe you deserve to go forward.
Right. So you kind of put it back in my court.
Mm-hmm.
And I took that step. And the first thing that I understood out of all this is that I have to have a reason to want to move from a negative mindset to a positive one.
Mm-hmm.
Once I made that decision, you started teaching me about the way I was thinking. I was thinking very negatively.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to start having some positive thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where you would say this begins.
Mm-hmm.
You got to begin with the basic thought.
Everything starts with a thought.
Everything starts with the thought. So once I start thinking a little bit positive, I feel my feelings get better. I'm not as angry at my ex-wife. I'm not as angry with the people at work. I'm not as upset with the situation that I find myself in. So those little positive thoughts triggered some positive feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So a thought gives us, a positive thought gives us a positive feeling, whereas negative. Thought generates feeling, which falls under one of two emotions, which is either positive love, which you can look at as God, or negative, which is fear, you can look at, as we talked about, as Satan. So that's all great stuff. But I'm a combat infantryman, I'm an engineer, I am an action guy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go. I mean, you go back to even when I was coaching high school football.
Yes.
Action oriented. So you help me understand, and I'll come at it from the other direction and meet in the middle. Every action is preceded by a decision.
Yes.
I cannot get in my truck and drive back to Joplin without making the decision that I'm going to get in my truck and drive back to Joplin.
That's right.
That's not going to teleport.
That's right.
So action is preceded by a decision. And decisions are all made emotionally first.
Mm-hmm.
And then backed up by logic.
Which is hard for an engineer to understand, because you guys deal in logic.
Yeah, most of us.
Most.
Some would say that engineers aren't very logical. So thought triggers a feeling, triggers an emotion, which leads us to a decision, and ultimately an action. So if I wanted to change from sitting in a hotel, I'm not afraid to, I was bawling my eyes out. I was a basket case with a gun to my head. If I wanted to get to a life of peace, I had to have trust in who I was listening to, and I had to change the way I was thinking. Would you say that that's basically the whole entire
That
premise?
sure does put it in a capsule. Yes. That if we could get that part of it to where we fully understand it, it'll change your life forever. The backside of that, and what causes it to happen, is that constant shifting back and forth of the spiritual energy between positive and negative. Where we make the decision, are we embracing, if you will, the positive? Are we embracing God? How many of us do we know somebody that it doesn't make any difference happen? They're always laughing, they're always happy. Sometimes you just want to say, can I just strangle you? Because nobody should be that happy all the time. But if you notice that they're very healthy, that they have a really good life, because they're always of a positive nature. That is the orientation of their life. On the other hand, that person is just always, they're the ones that you just want to put, throw out of your life.
You don't want to be anywhere around.
You don't want to be anywhere around them, because everything is negative and everything they do is being embraced from the fear or the Satan side of things. And that goes back to what we said earlier about the fact that, God gave us free will, and that's our decision. Or we're going to make that decision based on positive, on our principles of being positive and helpful and all of that, non-judgmental and all of that, or are we going to make it based on the other side, the fear, the anger, and all of that? And so the whole idea, what the reason thought is so powerful, the reason so important, is because it is what causes that shift of that energy, the conversion of the energy from positive to negative. And it happens that fast. So we go from, we shift that energy all day long, every microsecond in some cases. When I was go ahead.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
This is not linear, straight line, and once you take off, it's constant forward go. It's, you mentioned 3 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Exactly.
And if you could explain that a little bit.
Okay. This goes back to stuff that I learned from Harry in the years I worked with him. I'm going to share 2 things. First of all, he said, we shift back and forth across that line all day long. He said, the best we can hope for is probably to end up the day at somewhere around 60 or 65% positive energy, because you're feeling a fairly decent amount of peace at that period of time. So let's talk 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. You developed a self-image when you were very young. Of course, normally that's between 6 and 10. You got a chance to start at 4 because of what happened. You developed a self-image which included the fear of being alone. Mm-hmm. But when you look at it from the self-image, the real message was probably, I don't deserve, my daddy left me. How many people out there that have had things happen in their childhood where they walked away feeling they didn't deserve, that they weren't wanted? Those are horrible things to feel. Horrible things to feel. So that you have a self-image. That self-image is surrounded by what we refer to as a comfort zone. Mm-hmm. So let's say your self-image. I'm gonna. You ever know anybody go on a diet? Well, I got a better one than that.
I was gonna say, yeah, I've been there.
Well, I'm gonna give you a better one than that. And this was actually a case that I studied when I was in psychology when I was in college. There was this lady that, she was a beautiful lady, but she had a very large nose. So she always felt she was ugly. So she goes to a plastic surgeon to get his nose fixed, get her nose fixed. He promises that she will be beautiful. So they do the surgery, her face is bandaged and all of that. So when it's all healed up, her and her husband come into the doctor's office, and he said, now's a great reveal, you're going to see how beautiful you are. So they take the bandage off, and then they put a mirror in front of her face, and she starts screaming. She says, I am still ugly. Why didn't you reduce the size of my nose? In her mind, in her self-image, I am this ugly person because I have a large nose. Even though it was corrected, her self-image drove what she saw. But here's the interesting part. The comfort zone contains the behaviors that are acceptable by your self-image. So now my self-image is I don't deserve, and therefore good things shouldn't happen to me. And I will go out there and my actions will support that. Because if my actions don't support how I see myself, I must be crazy. Mm-hmm. But somebody says, hey, wait a minute, you can be very successful. I had a client was told by a friend of his when he was like 14, said, you'll never make more than $50,000 a year. And you know what? From then until he hit his mid-40s, he never made over $50,000 a year. He had many opportunities. He would get close to it. But what would happen once he got there? He'd sabotage it. He would fall back. Mm-hmm. And matter of fact, one of my clients that did a testimonial for us, she had said, this is my glass ceiling for income, because I don't deserve to make more than that. But that was being driven by some things that happened early in her life that drove her self-image. Mm-hmm. So here's the thing, 3 forward, 2 back. When we start behaving outside of that self-image, we get very outside of that, if our actions don't support it, our self-image, we're stretching our comfort zone. We don't feel comfortable doing this. And we can only stay out there for a little while. So we'll jump back in to those behaviors that support who we think we are, who we see ourselves as being. But here's the beauty. Once that's stretched, it'll never go back to the same size. So it's 3 steps forward to where I'm very uncomfortable, 2 steps back, some of that behavior is still going to be acceptable. Slow but sure, we stretch that comfort zone, and because of those behaviors, we literally impact our self-image.
And I struggled with that in the beginning in a couple of ways. One, that didn't apply to me. Once I'm going, you can't stop me. And I was humbled very quickly that you're right. I got out there and I felt, wait, no, I really don't deserve to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I did pull back, and I can remember, I can't count on the number of times that I apologized to you and said, I'm sorry, I know we've had this conversation before, and I'm back here again. Mm-hmm. And you're like, no, it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps. I mean, you understand. I didn't. And I struggled with that.
Mm-hmm.
I struggled with it.
I will tell you, when I was making my recovery, I struggled with it too. I told Harry one day, I said, isn't there something new we can talk about? He said, no. This is what we're going to talk about it until you move it from here to here. Because he said, I can change how you see yourself in your mind for a short period of time. And he used the diet thing. He said, let's say you weigh 250 pounds. You decide you want to lose 50, so you go on a diet. All of a sudden, you're down to 200 pounds. That's not who I am. You know what? I don't think it'll be a problem. I'll swing by McDonald's. 1 Big Mac isn't going to hurt me. Bingo. That begins it, because now that's a behavior I can accept. Yeah. That's a behavior I can accept.
Well, I wouldn't suggest anybody to lose weight like I did in 2017.
No, I wouldn't.
I lost 54 pounds in 6 weeks because I was such an emotional basket case that I couldn't eat. Mm-hmm. If it had been for keeping Gatorade in the small refrigerator in the hotel room, I wouldn't have had anything. So don't do it that way.
This is where we have to understand the connection between body, mind, and spirit. The body responds physically to what's going on emotionally. If you're under a lot of stress for a long period of time, it starts to manifest itself physically. Mm-hmm. Think about it, last time you had a bad cold or a flu. Were you clear-headed? Were you able to think well? No. What were your spirits like? Did you feel happy and excited and feel good? No. So what's happened is energy within your body was starting to focus more on the physical side. Mm-hmm. Because physically you weren't doing well. Same thing happens if, like when you went through the thing with your divorce, spiritually you were down, and as a result of that, physically you came down with it and lost all the weight and went through all that. That's why it's so important that we understand this movement and conversion of negative to positive energy. That's why it's so important that we remember the power of thought. Give you an example. A doctor, one of my surgeons, read my book, talked about this. And he came back to me one day and he said, I read that and I came to understand something. And he said, I'm going to give you a term maybe you've not heard before. He said, I call it emotional medicine. He said, I am really good at what I do. I can save lives every day. But he said, if my patient isn't emotionally in the right place, I can't save them. And that's absolutely true. I had major surgery this past year. They removed 6 inches of my colon. By the 3rd day, I was so in pain, even all this stuff that I know, I was so in pain and felt so bad, I said, you know what? I don't think I want to fight it anymore. I'm, at that point, 77 years old. Maybe it's just time for me to check out. But then a thought popped in my head. Nick, you can't do that. you've got children, you've got grandchildren, you've got a wonderful wife, plus you have a mission in your coaching and all of that. You will not give up. And within 2 days, I went home.
That's awesome. And this is what's really, really key out of all this. You're going to bounce back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
You can't allow yourself to beat yourself up when you are on the negative side. It's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to happen. You have to just continue to take that
Mm-hmm.
next little step,
Mm-hmm.
and because it's very easy. It was for me very easy that when I took that step back, I beat myself to pieces, and it slowed me down from getting to where I am today and where I needed to be,
Right.
because I beat myself up.
Right. We just have to remember what the process is. I'll wrap this up with one thing to say, and this was shared with me years ago and it stuck with me. God made no junk. Stop treating yourself like junk.
Sounds like good advice to me.